All right, well, thank you very much for joining me today, and we're going to talk about mountains in Scripture. I want to start by throwing you this little quote here from Jeremiah. God says, "Behold, I am against you, O destroying mountain, who destroys all the earth." Now, if you stop and think about that, does that make a whole lot of sense? Why would God be against mountains? And do mountains really destroy all the earth? This doesn't really make a lot of literal sense. So, what's going on here? Well, what I want to submit to you today is that mountains are a symbol for the things that we love the most. The kind of things that we orient our life around. You think about ancient civilizations. What did they do? They would camp around the mountain. They'd build a city around the mountain. So it's the kind of symbol that we are orienting our life around. That's what it is. It's a thing that we love the most. The beliefs, the ideas, those kind of things. And as usual, this idea comes to us from 18th century scientist, philosopher, and theologian EMANUEL Swedenborg. If you don't know who he is, look him up. But what I like about Swedenborg's interpretation is that he makes the Bible relevant to us in our daily life. It's no longer a story that just happened 2,000 to 4,000 years ago. It's a story that is about us. And if we understand the symbols properly, we can appreciate the Bible's guidance in our life. We'll start to give it authority to say, oh, look, don't do this. See what happens to these guys? It's not going to work out well. I should do this instead. It's warning us of the pitfalls of our life and warning us about our own inherent fallibility. But it also helps a lot with making sense of quotes like these. When Jesus says, you can cast a mountain into the sea if you just have enough faith. Now, again, it's kind of ridiculous, right? Because who's ever seen a mountain just pick up and move, right? There's been a lot of faithful people in the world, and nobody has ever done that. And I'm sure there's somebody who's tried, right? But that's what happens. Nothing. Now, Christians around the world have tried to figure out, what's Jesus talking about. You can look up the phrase mountain moving faith, and you'll find all sorts of sermons and topics and discourses on it. Joel Osteen did a sermon on it, and basically what he comes back with is that mountains are problems. And his big takeaway is that whatever problem is in your life, whatever obstacle there is, you can overcome it, you can cast it into the sea, because nothing will be impossible for you because God's on your side. Well, hey, that sounds nice. It's a fair enough point, but I don't think that's what mountains are about, because when you look at mountains elsewhere in Scripture, mountains aren't always bad. They're not always an obstacle. For example, when you have the children of Israel coming out of Egypt, well, where do they go? A mountain. Mount Sinai, known as the mountain of the Lord, right? So that's where they go. And this is a picture of a God-centric life. At the center of everything that you do is the Lord. He's directing your every move. He's setting you up. He's directing you, and everything's going to be great when you have God at the center of your life. Now, elsewhere in the Scriptures, particularly on the early side, mountains are a good place. Abraham offers a sacrifice to the Lord on a mountain. So does Jacob. And when Moses first encounters God, where does he encounter him? Yeah, Mount Sinai, burning bush on Mount Sinai. And he's told, when you have brought the children of Israel out of Egypt, you're going to serve me on this mountain. So mountains aren't bad, at least at the beginning of Scripture. The story starts to change when we get to the book of Kings. Jeroboam splits the kingdom, and he says, you guys aren't going to worship anymore down in Jerusalem. You're going to worship up north with me. And we'll set up some shrines, and it's all going to be great, and we can worship the real gods. We can worship these wooden poles and these graven images, all things that they're, of course, supposed to not worship. And they can do that all up there, and it's a picture of loving ourselves. Think about it. They're going to worship the things that they made with their own hands. So that's, in essence, worshiping yourself. And it's at that point in Scripture that mountains start to take on a bad symbolism. They start to represent this idea of selfishness and pride. Isaiah, he basically spells it all out for us. He says, the day of Jehovah Sabaoth will be against everyone that is lofty and high, against all high mountains. Pretty clear there, right? Everyone that is lofty and high, they are high mountains. So mountains are a symbol for people who are full of pride. We get the same kind of idea when we go back to our original quote in Jeremiah. This makes more sense now. God doesn't hate mountains, but he is against pride. And what does pride do? It destroys us. It destroys us. So God is against that because he doesn't want us to be destroyed. Look at Ezekiel. God says, I'm against Mount Seir, and you shall know that I am God. Now, are atheistic mountains a problem? Is it a problem that a mountain doesn't acknowledge God? Of course not. Mountains can't acknowledge God. But a negative love that we orient our life around can be pride, and God would be against that. And lastly, we have this one here. God says he's going to bring a sword against a mountain. Again, a terrible weapon to use against a mountain. It's just not very effective. You can sit there and tink away all day long and you're not going to do any damage to a mountain. But God's sword, a sword of truth against pride, well, that makes more sense. And if you want to delve further into this image, well, what you have to do is just stop and think about mountains and their physical characteristics. Like when I think about mountains, some of the things I came up with is that they're really big. They're imposing on a landscape. But I think the one that makes the most powerful statement to me is that mountains are permanent. The things that I loved the most as a kid are the things that I still love the most as an adult. The things that I struggled with the most with as a kid, they're often the same things that I'm still struggling with now. And so it feels like I can't get rid of it. It feels like even though I love this thing and I don't want to love it, it's still there. This is why Jesus says, if you have enough faith, you can cast that mountain into the sea. He's not talking about literal mountains, and Jesus doesn't hate literal mountains. It makes no sense. But he's talking about those things that have been big and imposing on your personal landscape and have been there forever, and you can't even imagine it not being there. He says, if you have enough faith, you can cast those into the sea. Doesn't matter what that love is that you're orienting your life around. Take your 7 deadly sins: wrath, sloth, lust, gluttony, envy, pride, greed. Any of those things. No matter how long you've been struggling with it, you can get rid of it. This is why Donald Sutherland even says, it's the things that we love the most that destroy us. Because he knows that the things that we get into that are not good will destroy us. It's true. Ask anybody who's had an addiction with gambling or alcohol, sex or drugs, all those things. We get into them and we love them the most, and we orient our entire lives around them, and they destroy us. But again, mountains aren't always bad. If we have a God-centric mountain, if God is what we have at the center of our life, mountains can be very beneficial. Once again, think about physical characteristics. This is from National Geographic. Mountains influence weather patterns. So if a storm of life is rolling in, but you've got a God mountain between you and the storm, what's going to happen? Well, you're going to be buffered from that storm, right? You're driving to work, somebody's cutting you off, being rude and ridiculous on the roads, and instead of dishing hate back at them, what do? You just keep on driving. You're cool as can be because you don't even notice their ridiculousness. You don't even take it in. You just bounces right off. It breezes right around. It goes on to their side because you have a God-centric life, and all you're doing is putting out love and understanding towards other people. You go, well, that guy clearly didn't mean to be a jerk. He just didn't see me. He's in a hurry. His wife's pregnant. Must be trying to get to the hospital. You dish out understanding and see the good in people, and that's a God-centric mountain. That's the way it's supposed to be. Mountains also provide refuge against invading enemies. You can hide in the mountains and stuff like that. So you can really play around with this, and as you consider the different physical characteristics of mountains, you can see how having a God-centric mountain can benefit you in your life. This image we have here of the children of Israel at Mount Sinai, that's really what we're striving for. God arranges the camps all around them, and they're in order for a particular reason, because it's representing how our loves should all be heading towards God and circled around Him. So there you have it. Mountains are about the things that we love the most. So I hope that helps you. I hope you found it interesting. If you like this video, hey, give the video a thumbs up. If you want to see more of this, subscribe. I try to do this once a month. And if nothing else, all the best to you on your journey. God bless.